Logan Milan was known to everyone as a pathetic failure, a noble bastard with no talent for the sword. But in his final moments, he was the revolutionary who shook the foundations of the imperial castle. As the device vigorously exploded, Logan felt the searing heat as the entire castle collapsed around him. His life had been fueled only by revenge and the bitter regret that he never begged his family for forgiveness. Suddenly, Logan jerked awake in a soft bed, his head throbbing with a pain that shouldn't exist after death. He was interrupted by his servant Rick, a man he distinctly remembered dying 30 years ago. Looking out the window, he saw the Milan family flags flying proudly and knights practicing in the courtyard. His younger brother Rainian appeared, trembling with fear because Logan usually treated him with nothing but malice. Logan vividly recalled this day, the day he pathetically lost a duel to his brother and cursed him as the child of a concubine. Breaking into sobs, Logan asked his brother to come closer and apologized for his years of cruelty. He realized he had really regressed to the past and vowed to change the upcoming tragic events. He ordered his servants to bring him pen and paper, terrifying them because of his sudden change in attitude. He began recording every major disaster of the next decade, focusing first on the war that would destroy his family in 1 year. As he walked through the hallway, he noticed the maids and servants still flinched at his presence, terrified of the bastard he used to be. When a maid tumbled in front of him, he offered her a hand, but she only knelt and begged for mercy. Logan realized his smile was terrifying, and that it would take time for everyone to adjust to his new self. He finally went to meet his father, Patrick Milan, a cold-hearted patriarch he had resented for 20 years. He realized that his father wasn't cruel, but heartbroken at having to cast away his own foolish child in the past life. Logan cut to the chase and asked for permission to go into isolated training on the family plot. Patrick assumed he was trying to run away from his failures, mocking his lack of effort and immaturity. However, Logan acknowledged his past foolishness and earnestly begged for a chance to get his immaturity under control. Sensing his son's sincerity, Patrick allowed the training, even telling him to stay warm during the cold spring nights. Logan prepared for his isolation, knowing he could finally use the Divine Sword Secrets book he had memorized in the future. The book contained secrets passed down by the ancient hero who slayed an evil dragon. He began the grueling process of modifying his body, using a powerful life force called the Force. To his amazement, he managed to create a force core in just a single minute, a feat that would normally take years. Dense energy burst through his body like rain after a long drought, completely changing his constitution. He swung his sword to test his new strength, sending a powerful shockwave cascading through the air. For 3 months, he devoted himself to mastering the 10 sword techniques recorded in the secret manual. He focused his energy into the first technique, the slashing wave, which tore through a massive tree like a monster. His hand trembled with the sheer power of the strike, but he knew he now had a trump card for the coming war. After finishing his training, he realized he smelled terrible and needed to wash up before meeting his father. Upon returning to the mansion, he was blocked by an obnoxious knight named Dominion, who refused him entry. Using his amplified senses, Logan heard the guards gossiping and calling him a coward for running away. Logan threw a pair of gloves at the knight's face, demanding a duel to pay for the unjust humiliation. He taunted Dominion, asking if he was scared to fight a rumored coward who was past his prime. Dominion boiled with rage and accepted the duel, fully ready to crush the young master. The servants panicked, believing Logan would die since he wasn't known to be a force user. Dominion used a clumsy force aura, proving to Logan that the knight had no real control over his energy. Logan halted Dominion's secret technique with a single blow, leaving the entire crowd slack-jawed. After showing mercy once, Logan proceeded to thrash the knight brutally to teach the family discipline. The knights realized Logan had changed completely, having awakened a force that felt like decades of training. Patrick Milan watched from the balcony, realizing that his son had truly returned as a different man. Logan knew this was only the beginning of his plan to conquer the Empire and rewrite history. Logan sat cross-legged in his private chambers, feeling the familiar hum of mana in the air. Before him lay the Divine Sword Secrets, the manual that had cost him his life in his previous timeline. He knew that his current body was weak and lacked the foundation for high-level martial arts. The first step of the manual required a complete reconstruction of his mana circuits. As he began the first breath, a searing heat surged through his chest like liquid fire. He gritted his teeth, refusing to let out a single scream that might alert the guards. Hours passed until the morning sun began to peek through the narrow windows. He stood up and felt a newfound lightness in his limbs that he hadn't felt in decades. Strength alone would not be enough. He needed an astronomical amount of gold to fund his future war. The Milan family was currently on the verge of bankruptcy due to his father's poor investments. He remembered the one-sided engagement that was about to be broken by the Duke of Felton. In his past life, he had begged them to stay, making himself the laughingstock of the capital. This time, he would turn that humiliation into a lucrative business transaction. Logan marched into his father's office, surprising the older man with his sudden change in demeanor. His father, Count Patrick Milan, looked up from his papers with a worried expression. Logan told his father that he would handle the upcoming meeting with the Duke's messengers. A few days later, the carriage bearing the Felton family crest arrived at the Milan gates. A pompous knight stepped out, holding a document that would nullify the marriage contract. Logan greeted the messenger in the reception hall, showing no signs of the expected heartbreak. The knight was taken aback by the boy's calm, as he had heard Logan was a spoiled brat. Logan read the document quickly and threw it onto the table with a loud thud. He stated that breaking a sacred oath between noble families required proper compensation. The knight laughed, claiming the Milan family was too poor to make any demands. Logan's eyes turned cold as he released a sliver of the aura he had developed through his training. The knight's laughter died in his throat as he felt a crushing pressure on his chest. Logan demanded 100,000 gold coins for the emotional damage and the breach of contract. The knight stammered that the amount was insane and that the Duke would never agree. Logan reminded him that a lawsuit in the imperial court would cost the Duke much more in reputation. Realizing he was outmatched by the teenager's logic, the knight agreed to bring the terms back to the Duke. Within a week, a massive shipment of gold arrived, shocking everyone in the Milan territory. His father cried tears of joy as the family's debts were cleared in a single day. But Logan didn't stop there, as he knew gold was only useful if it was invested properly. He spent the next month alternating between grueling sword practice and studying the market. His body screamed in protest, but the memories of his past failure pushed him forward. By the end of the month, he had reached the second stage of the Divine Sword Manual. Now that he had the funds and the basic strength, it was time to find the people who would build his empire. He had a list of 3 geniuses who were currently ignored by the world, but would later become legends. The first was a failed merchant named Philip, currently rotting in a debt-ridden slum. Logan knew that Philip's gold bug instincts would be the engine of his future economy. However, as he approached the merchant's location, he noticed several armed men surrounding the building. A scream echoed from inside, signaling that his future treasurer was in immediate danger. Logan burst through the door, but the sight he saw made him freeze in his tracks. Logan stood frozen at the doorway as he watched his father, Patrick, counting the mountain of gold coins delivered from the engagement cancellation. He knew this wealth was only the beginning, and that it would quickly vanish if not managed by a true genius. Logan recalled the name of a man who, in his previous life, was known as the Gold Bug, who funded the empire's expansion. Without wasting a single moment, Logan packed a small bag and prepared to head toward the merchant district of the capital. He ignored the protests of his family servants as he strode toward the stables with purpose. The journey took him through winding mountain passes where the air was crisp and thin. He eventually reached a dusty, dilapidated tavern on the outskirts of the commercial hub. Inside the tavern, a man with messy hair and broken spectacles sat alone, buried in a pile of crumbling ledgers. Logan approached the table and slammed a heavy pouch of gold down, startling the merchant. He looked Philip in the eye and offered him a chance to control more money than the king himself. Philip adjusted his glasses, looking at the young noble as if he were a madman or a dreamer. Logan began to detail his plans for a new trade route that only he knew would become the heart of the kingdom's economy. As Logan spoke, Philip's eyes widened, realizing the sheer genius and foresight of the plan. With a shaky hand, the merchant reached out and gripped Logan's hand, sealing their secret partnership. With the gold bug now in his pocket, Logan turned his sights toward his next target, the legendary craftsman. He traveled deep into the Iron Mountains, where the sounds of hammers echoed through the valleys like thunder. The heat became unbearable as he approached the great forge where the master dwarf resided. Hamar the dwarf stood before a massive anvil, striking a glowing piece of steel with rhythmic perfection. Without looking up, the dwarf growled at Logan to leave, claiming he didn't work for mere nobles anymore. Logan didn't argue, but instead pulled out a blueprint he had drawn from memory, the design for a repeating crossbow. Hamar stopped his hammer mid-swing, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the complex mechanics of the weapon. The dwarf grabbed the paper with his soot-stained hands, muttering about the impossibility and brilliance of the gears. Logan explained that this was only a fraction of the technology he planned to bring to life. Hamar demanded to know where such a design came from, his pride as a craftsman clearly ignited. Logan simply smiled and told him that more secrets awaited him if he joined the Milan family. The dwarf packed his heaviest tools, unable to resist the challenge of creating a weapon that could change warfare. With the continent's best brain and best brawn secured, Logan began the long march back to his territory. He spent the journey briefing Hamar on the specific materials needed for the repeating crossbow's internal springs. Upon his return, he found Philip already working in the manor's archives, streamlining the family's messy finances. Philip revealed that the Milan family had been losing thousands of gold coins every year due to simple accounting errors. Logan nodded, knowing that with this saved wealth, he could now afford to train his own private army. He ordered the construction of a secret training facility in the woods behind the estate. Hamar began work on the first prototype of the crossbow, the sound of his hammer ringing out day and night. Logan didn't neglect his own training, pushing his body to the limit using the divine sword secrets. Every muscle in his body screamed, but he welcomed the pain as a sign of his growing strength. He could feel the mana within him circulating faster, carving out more efficient pathways than before. News arrived from the border that the rival Tessin family was beginning to move their troops toward Milan territory. Logan knew this war was coming, and it was exactly the opportunity he needed to test his new forces. He gathered his first group of 30 recruited soldiers, men who were desperate and had nothing to lose. He threw a crate of the newly finished crossbows at their feet, demanding they learn to kill with them in 3 days. The soldiers looked at the strange weapons with confusion, never having seen such intricate designs before. Logan told them that their lives depended on these tools, for the Tessin army was 5 times their size. Just as the first training session began, a scout rode in frantically, shouting that the enemy had already crossed the river. The scout's voice cracked with terror as he pointed toward the southern horizon. Logan tightened his grip on the reins of his horse, his eyes narrowing as he processed the news. He knew the Tessin family would strike early, but their speed was unexpected. Logan barked orders to his commanders to mobilize the infantry immediately. The dwarf Hamar stood nearby, wiping grease from his hands onto a leather apron. Behind him lay rows of the newly finished repeating crossbows, their metal frames gleaming. These weapons were the key to overcoming the massive numerical disadvantage of the Milan house. Distant dust clouds signaled the approach of the Tessin vanguard. Logan led his 200 specialized soldiers toward a narrow ridge overlooking the main road. He chose the terrain carefully, ensuring the enemy would be funneled into a kill zone. The soldiers took their positions in the tall grass, holding their breath. Many of these men were commoners who had never seen real combat before today. Logan walked along the line, placing a firm hand on the shoulders of his men. The sound of marching boots and clanking armor soon filled the air from below. The Tessin knights rode at the front, their banners fluttering with arrogance. They believed the Milan family was a weak target ripe for easy picking. Logan waited until the middle of the enemy column was directly beneath his position. He dropped his hand with a sharp downward motion. A rhythmic thwack 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 echoed across the hills as the first volley was released. Hundreds of bolts rained down like a swarm of angry hornets. The lead horses of the Tessin knights collapsed instantly as the projectiles pierced their hides. The enemy commander looked up in horror at the source of the unexpected fire. Before they could even raise their shields, a second volley struck them. The repeating mechanism allowed the Milan soldiers to fire 5 times faster than traditional units. "Take cover," the Tessin knight screamed, but there was nowhere to hide in the open pass. Logan drew his own sword, the blade humming with a faint, magical resonance. He leaped from the ridge, descending toward the center of the panicked enemy. His landing was punctuated by a shockwave of mana that sent several soldiers flying. He began to carve through the ranks with the techniques learned from his future life. The Tessin soldiers, once arrogant, now fled in every direction to escape the slaughter. In less than an hour, the 500-man vanguard of the Tessin family was decimated. Logan looked at his men, who were now cheering with newfound confidence. This was only a small fraction of the enemy's total strength, however. He knew the head of the Tessin family would personally lead the next wave. Back at the castle, Logan's father stared at the report of the victory in disbelief. He wondered how his shameless son had turned a group of farmers into elite killers. Suddenly, a messenger falcon arrived at the window with a seal from the capital. The letter warned that the Sword Duke was watching these local skirmishes with interest. If the royal family perceived the Milan house as too powerful, they might intervene. Logan, unaware of the letter, began planning his next move to seize the Tessin mines. As the camp settled into a quiet hum, a dark shadow moved through the nearby trees. An assassin sent by the Tessen's secret allies was closing in on Logan's tent. Logan's eyes snapped open in the darkness as he felt a cold blade pressing against the fabric of his tent. Logan's eyes snapped open in the darkness as he felt a cold blade pressing against the fabric of his tent. With a swift, practiced motion, he rolled off the bed and drew the short sword hidden beneath his pillow. The intruder's blade sliced through the air where his head had been just a second prior. Logan didn't call for guards, choosing instead to test his newly refined divine sword techniques on the assassin. Within 3 strikes, the attacker was disarmed and pinned against the central pole of the tent. He pulled back the mask to reveal a face he recognized from his past life as a top-tier Imperial scout. Instead of execution, Logan offered the man a chance to serve the House of Milan as a shadow agent. Realizing the Tessen family war was finally over, Logan turned his gaze toward the far-off spires of the capital city. He knew that military strength alone wouldn't be enough to survive the upcoming civil war. A few weeks later, Logan and a small elite guard approached the massive gates of the imperial capital. The city was just as magnificent as he remembered, with floating spires and white marble walls. His first objective was to secure a meeting with the legendary Sword Duke, the Empire's greatest warrior. To gain the Duke's attention, Logan brought a gift that no noble could possibly refuse. Inside the carriage were crates of rare red drake meat, a monster flesh known for its immense medicinal properties. In his past life, this meat had sparked a gold rush, but now Logan held the monopoly on the hunting grounds. At the entrance of the Duke's estate, the guards initially scoffed at a provincial noble's arrival. Logan simply opened one of the crates, allowing the potent aroma of the high-grade monster meat to waft through the air. The guards' eyes widened as they felt their own internal mana react to the proximity of the rare delicacy. Minutes later, Logan was being ushered through the most lavish gardens he had ever seen. He finally reached a training field where an old man was swinging a massive wooden practice sword. Each swing of the Sword Duke tore the air apart, creating visible shock waves that shook the nearby trees. Logan stepped forward and performed a perfect knight's salute, standing firm despite the crushing pressure. The Sword Duke stopped his training and turned his piercing blue eyes toward the young visitor. The Duke asked why a shameless bastard from a failing border family would dare disturb his solitude. Logan replied that he didn't come to beg, but to offer a partnership that would sustain the Duke's private army for years. Interested by the boy's audacity, the Duke agreed to taste the meat Logan had brought. As soon as the Duke ate, a surge of mana radiated from his body, cracking the stone floor beneath his chair. He realized this meat was not just food, but a catalyst that could help his elite soldiers break through their current limits. Logan explained that his family controlled the only territory where these monsters could be reliably farmed. He offered the Duke a steady supply in exchange for political protection and training for his own officers. The Duke laughed heartily and shook Logan's hand, cementing an alliance that would shock the capital's political circles. Word spread quickly through the capital that the bastard of Milan was now a favored guest of the Sword Duke. Logan used this newfound fame to meet with the capital's top merchants, selling the remaining meat at astronomical prices. With his pockets full of gold and a powerful backer, he began the second phase of his plan, acquiring lost artifacts. He spent days scouring the black markets for the heart of the Frost Giant, a relic that was useless to most but essential for his next sword technique. However, his rapid rise did not go unnoticed by the Crown Prince's faction, who saw Logan as a potential threat. Logan felt the eyes of spies following him every time he left the Duke's estate. He knew his time in the capital was coming to an end, and he needed to return to his territory to prepare for war. On his final night, he visited the Sword Duke one last time to finalize their secret military pact. The Duke warned him that the Bafro territory he sought to reclaim was currently infested with something far worse than monsters. Logan simply nodded, knowing exactly what horrors awaited him in the ancestral lands of his forefathers. As he rode out of the city gates at midnight, a messenger bird landed on his shoulder with a frantic note. The note revealed that the Bafro territory had already been seized by a rival faction backed by a dark mage. Logan spurred his horse into a gallop, his heart racing with the realization that his timeline was moving faster than expected. In the distance, a strange purple light pulsed from the direction of the Bafro border, illuminating the clouds like a dying heart. Suddenly, his horse reared up in terror as the ground beneath them began to liquefy into a black, oily substance. Logan gripped the reins tightly as the black, oily substance beneath his horse's hooves began to pulse with a malevolent energy. He realized this was a high-level earth magic trap set by the Bafro mages to intercept his vanguard. With a swift motion, Logan drew his mithril sword and plunged it into the center of the liquefying earth. A surge of pure force erupted from the blade, shattering the spell and solidifying the ground instantly. The hidden Bafro scouts shrieked in surprise as their concealment spells were blown away by the impact. Logan did not give them a chance to recover, ordering his crossbowmen to fire immediately. A hail of bolts from the repeating crossbows whistled through the air, finding their marks with lethal precision. This skirmish was merely the gateway to the Bafro castle, the land that rightfully belonged to the Milan family. He remembered how his father had wept when this territory was seized by political trickery in the previous timeline. Now, Logan stood at the head of a private army that even the Empire's central legions would fear. He signaled for the Iron Hoof cavalry to prepare for a full-scale charge against the castle gates. Hamar the dwarf had personally reinforced the battering rams with specialized monster hide dampeners. The Bafro lord watched from the ramparts, his face pale as he saw the sheer scale of Logan's force. The lord ordered his archers to rain fire, but the Milanum soldiers raised their enchanted shields in a perfect tortoise formation. Logan leaped from his horse, his body shrouded in a whirlwind of force as he cleared the castle moat in a single bound. He landed on the outer wall like a meteor, the impact shattering the stone and sending defenders flying. His blade became a blur of light, cutting through the Bafro elite guards as if they were made of paper. Seeing their leader on the walls, the Milan soldiers let out a roar that shook the very foundations of the valley. Within hours, the Bafro flag was torn down and replaced with the golden lion crest of the Milan family. Logan stood in the throne room, looking at the map of the empire spread across the table. This victory gave him control over the southern trade routes, securing the resources needed for the final stage of his plan. Reports arrived that the emperor's health was failing, and the Duke of Lux was already mobilizing his knights. The Great Civil War, the catastrophe that had ended his first life, was beginning even sooner than he anticipated. He summoned his commanders, including Philip and Hamar, to discuss the final mobilization. Philip reported that their coffers were overflowing with gold, enough to sustain a 10-year campaign. Hamar boasted that the new Dragon Slayer cannons were ready for deployment at the capital's gates. Logan knew that this time, he wouldn't be a mere rebel dying in the mud. He would be the one to decide who sat on the throne, or perhaps he would take it for himself. The morning of the march arrived, and the entire Milan army stood in perfect formation in the Bafro courtyard. Logan's father arrived to see the reclaimed land, his eyes misty with pride and disbelief. He handed Logan the ancestral signet ring, officially passing the mantle of family head to his son. Logan turned to his men and raised his sword, the divine sword secret's aura flaring like a second sun. He promised them a world where merit mattered more than bloodline, and where their families would never know hunger. The march to the capital began, a river of steel flowing across the landscape toward the heart of the empire. At the capital, the corrupt high nobles trembled as they heard of Logan Milan's approach. The legendary Sword Duke stood on the palace walls, waiting for the young man who had promised to change the world. Logan reached the gates and, instead of attacking, he requested a formal audience with the dying emperor. He presented the secret records of the Lux family's treason, gathered over 30 years of his previous and current life. The evidence was undeniable, and the power shifted instantly as the emperor named Logan the protector of the realm. The civil war was averted before it could destroy the nation, and the Milan family's name was forever etched in glory. Logan looked at his hands, knowing he had finally escaped the cycle of regret and changed the destiny of all. As the new sun rose over a peaceful empire, the shameless bastard had become its greatest savior.